So I thought you said you were doing it. Sorry, Louise.
Sorry. We're live.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nick Adams-King. I'm the Executive Member for H2050 and Corporate Services, and welcome to my decision day. With the exception of consideration of matters which are confidential or exempt, this decision day is currently being broadcast live on YouTube via the County Council website. And I'd like to welcome my colleague, Councillor Zoe Huggins, who is the other Executive Member for Hampshire 2050 and also looks after HR Communications and Performance. Councillor Jonathan Glenn, who is the Chairman of the Hampshire 2050 Select Committee. Councillor Adrian Collett, who is the Liberal Democrat opposition spokesperson, and Councillor Malcolm Wallace from the Green Party, who is the independent group spokesperson. And I don't know, Rod's not here, is he? I'm not sure whether Rod's here. So we do have apologies from Councillor Jan Warwick, who's the deputy leader and who's not around this afternoon. So we have no deputations. And therefore, the first item on our agenda is the 2025-26 Revenue Budget Savings and Capital Programme, and the report that went to Select Committee this morning. And I think that's Gary's going to introduce it. Is that right, Gary?
I'm happy to take it.
Sorry, Sarah.
Sorry, leader. I was just struggling to come off mute. No, Sarah Magnus is going to take it. Who's our lead finance business person.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, I'll be succinct, as we've already discussed this at previous briefings and Select Committee this morning. So we have three recommendations for Hampshire 2050. Firstly, to recommend the revised 2024-25 budget and the proposed 25-26 budget, which includes the proposed SP25 Phase 2 savings. Separately, for the exec member to approve the SP25 Phase 2 savings proposals. And lastly, to recommend the summary capital budget for 25-26 to 27-28. I'll pull out a couple of key points in relation to the recommendations. The 25-26 budget represents a £2 million decrease compared to the original 24-25 budget due to £3.3 million of savings, which have been partially offset by 0.6 million of inflation and 0.6 million of pressures. The SP25 Phase 2 savings contained within the report are 0.3 million for 25-26, rising to £500,000 in 26-27. And then lastly, with regards to the capital budget, straightforward for 25-26 onwards, and is represented by £1.8 million of residual loan funding to support the Money Down Land project, and 2.4 million, which is profiled use of LEP reserves following integration on the 1st of April. I'll pause there.
Sarah, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. So let me check whether my colleagues would like to say anything about this. We had a pretty good debate in the Select Committee this morning about it. Zoe, have you got anything that you'd like to add?
No, my main point I want to pick up on the next agenda item, but I think you're quite correct. The conversation this morning and the debate that we had was really robust, and it covered questions on local government settlement, the recovery finances, but also obviously the flexibility under social care and the pressures that Sarah just mentioned there regarding inflation and things like that. So it may be for Adrian and Malcolm that might have comment around the debate that they had this morning.
Yeah, Jonathan, you chaired that debate. Do you have any comment for us?
No, I'm happy with the way it went. Nothing to add.
No, super. And Adrian and Malcolm. Adrian, would you like to add anything to?
No, the one thing that worried me when I read the report was the reduction in the money for climate change and environmental strategy. I did email Gary about that, and he kindly responded. Most of his response seemed absolutely fine. There was one part that seemed to imply that we might lose one member of staff, if I've read it correctly. I'm just trying to find the information. But here we are. No. I didn't get a chance to follow that up with Gary, so I wonder, Gary, it's the second or the third bullets of what you told me.
Yes, so just for everyone's benefit, Councillor Collett was looking at the variance in the appendices where the budget for climate change and environmental strategy seemingly has quite a big jump between the budget for this financial year and the budget for next financial year. As Councillor Collett has said, the vast proportion of that is explained essentially by decisions. It's either the implication of some one-off money that increased the budget artificially this financial year, and or SP25 phase 1 decisions in relation to grant funding that we've already taken. Councillor Collett's absolutely right. There's the opportunity that we've identified as part of a wider piece of organisational redesign savings, where we believe there's an opportunity around bringing together potential structures and some organisational efficiencies, which aren't necessarily unique to that individual team, which is why, you know, we've not got worked up structures and we need to go through kind of staff consultations and things like that. But we believe, given current vacancies that exist within the structure, there are kind of opportunities to do things more efficiently and effectively without necessarily reducing the amount of outputs that we currently get from that team. So 50,000 within that total figure relates to those opportunities we believe are there around some operational efficiencies within the team.
Thank you, Chair. I think what I'm looking for is a reassurance that and Gary's picked up the very point that I was concerned about, that doesn't mean that our capacity to tackle the climate change issue will in any way be reduced or hampered. I totally recognise the financial situation that we're in, but the one thing we cannot afford to do less on is the climate change. And indeed, I've got a motion I've put down to council that I hope will get widespread support on the Climate and Nature Bill. But this is something we just cannot afford to compromise on. So I'm taking it from what you said, Gary, that's what you're telling me.
Yeah, and Leader, if I might add to that, Councillor Collett, that part of the thinking is also around, because we're talking about net and gross budgets as well, there are the opportunities to you know, maintain staff and resources, albeit fund them in different ways as well. And so we do have the opportunity, particularly to sort of maintain capacity and potentially increase capacity in certain areas, albeit not funding through necessarily cash limit budgets, but alternative avenues that are available, whether that's one-off pots of money or whether that's grants from central government or other organisations as well. So there's no predetermination in terms of actually how we will deliver that saving. We just believe there is an opportunity to either fund structures in a slightly different way or develop further efficiencies. But to reassure you, Councillor Collett, that's without detriment to the current service and capacity we have within the teams.
Thank you.
I know Zoe's keen to come in, Adrian, because she's been robust in sort of saying pretty much the same thing as we've gone through this conversation.
Yeah, it's just to echo that, and that will continue as obviously we're renewing our climate change strategy this year, and also the continued work we do with the expert forum. So yeah, I echo Gary's comments. Our commitment, and as exec member for climate change, our commitment to climate change is still there and strong as we go forward, Councillor Collett.
Thank you. Well, you have an ally in me in keeping the emphasis up on that one. Thank you.
And I'm sure we have an ally in Malcolm as well.
Yeah, of course.
So any questions as well, Malcolm, from your side?
No, we had a good debate this morning and raised my questions there, so thank you.
Super, that's great. So thanks so much, everybody. The recommendations are on page 5 in paragraphs. In paragraph 1, bullet points 1 to 3. We had a good debate this morning, and the proposals were backed by select committee, so I'm happy to approve those. And we're on to item 2, which is another budgetary item. It's 25-26 revenue budget reports from corporate services. And I think that's back to you, Sarah, I think.
Yes, I'll take that one as well. I feel like I'm going to be repeating myself. I'll say many of the same words. Okay, so the recommendations for corporate services are to recommend the revised 24-25 budget and proposed 25-26 budget for corporate services, which include the proposed SP25 phase 2 savings. And lastly, for the exec member to approve the SP25 phase 2 savings proposals for submission to cabinet. And there's no capital budget for corporate services. Key points in relation to the recommendations. Firstly, with regards to 25-26 budget, it's a small decrease compared to prior year of just £500,000, but that does actually mask what has happened within corporate services, which is actually £9 million of savings programme, and this has been offset by cost increases related primarily to pay inflation, £2 million of pressures, and £3 million, which is an increase in the budget to centralise the enabling functions of comms and engagement, some elements of IT and trading units. And just to highlight that although this is an increase in budget for corporate services, that particular bit is net neutral across the county council as budgets are removed from other directorates to put into corporate services. The savings included, SP25 phase 2 savings are £1.7 million across corporate services, and there is also an extra 1.1 million of IT related savings which will be delivered via reserves. Thank you.
Super, thanks very much, Sarah. And that again was pretty robustly debated this morning at Select Committee. Zoe, I know that you've got one particular issue that was a bit of a hot topic that you'd like to bring up.
So one member quite rightly raised some concerns on page 47. So I suppose my thought is reflection from this morning's comments and debate, and obviously to seek some reassurance. I appreciate obviously that Solent Sea Rescue Organisation, SSRO, obviously does valuable work. And I think we can all be mindful that organisations like that work in the community obviously budget and forecast for a sustainable future in advance. So first of all, I wish to recognise that in our good partnership work, obviously we are seeking to withdraw funding, not next year, but the year after that, so 26-27, which does give us 12 months working with that partnership. And I suppose what I'm seeking reassurance for is we have precedents in this. We've previously worked with partners where we've maybe exited a funding contract, where we've worked with them to seek alternative funding and to review their business model, to review their budget and their reserves to mitigate the risk of that withdrawal of funding, and enter in a period of negotiation. And that transition period may be mindful of our position and the changing landscape that we may find ourselves in regarding devolution and local government reorganisation and exceptional financial support, but have that open and sort of transactional dialogue where we look at that negotiation. And it may be options that we extend a phased period of that withdrawal, but I just want reassurance that we will do the same as we've done with others with the SSRO.
I think that was certainly something that reflects some of the conversation this morning. I'm not sure who's best to answer that, be it Gary or Rob, perhaps, to give a sense of what our options might be around that, or Jack.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, sorry. It's only that it sits in my area, but I don't know that I'm necessarily the best person to answer that specific question. So I know the intention is to obviously work with them over the course of the year so that they know when we're withdrawing and can have time and those things. There is a question for me around our capacity to do what you're describing, Zoe, in terms of, supporting them with alternative business models or funding options, etc. And actually, I'm not clear in my own mind whether that is well, I don't think it's our responsibility, but that's not really the point. Do you know what I mean? Like, is there a duty there in terms of partnership, as you've described, that we should be doing that as opposed to our responsibility? So I'm really interested in what others think. I'm sorry if that sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but if I'm honest, I hadn't seen it quite like you're describing, Zoe. So I don't just want to glibly say yes, of course, if that's not what we can do.
Carolyn wants to come in, I think.
Yeah,
perhaps it can be helpful. The difference with this particular proposal is that we are providing a basic grant fund, and the grant funding goes specifically towards paying for an insurance policy. Where I think what you're describing, Zoe, is where we've been working in a partnership context and jointly funding operational delivery. And it is, as Jack says, quite different. I think what we've been able to reassure ourselves around is that there are significant reserves across the organisations that will more than allow them to fund the insurance for many, many, many years to come. But despite that, in being reasonable, we've allowed a year for them to transition their relationship. I mean, obviously, if there is something that they wish to ask of us, and we can be helpful, then of course we will. But I think that is the fundamental difference. It's a simple passport of money that they then use to buy an insurance policy, which is somewhat different. Thank you.
Okay, super. So Jonathan, sorry, you've moved around my screen, Jonathan, but now you're there. I don't know whether again you chaired the debate, whether you've got any reflection to make on the general item or the SSRO point that was raised. Oh, you've muted, sorry.
I discovered the SSRO money was for the insurance policy at the end of the meeting. Graham Burgess brought the subject up. He wanted to talk to the meeting after we made the decision, and I said, you can't do that, I've got to get on to the next item. So he's probably going to email everybody to explain that that's where the money was going. The fact that they've got reserves actually is brilliant, and we have to be consistent in our approach that we've given up on non-statutory duties all over the county council, and we're now talking about very important non-statutory duties, and they have to be the first to go before we start reducing our statutory duties. So there you go. I'm afraid it's inevitable.
Yeah. Super, thanks. Adrian, any comment?
Nothing to add, thank you.
And Malcolm?
Nothing from me either. Thank you.
No. Great, thanks. I mean, I think the much of the conversation was around the SSRO, and I know it's a big issue for our colleagues in Gosport in particular. I think there are two things for me that I've drawn from the conversation around it. It's something that we had been talking about prior to today, so it didn't come particularly as a surprise, but it was raised this morning. I did also talk to Graham ahead of the meeting. He asked to spend some time with me, and I talked him through some of that. The SSRO effectively is an organisation that does some brilliant work providing support to sea rescue organisations, both the air ambulance and the lifeboats. The constituent organisations do have a significant amount of reserves. So that's something that, as we've said, we are using the last of our reserves, our available reserves next year to cover our budget. So Jonathan is absolutely correct that we look at everything. And also, if you think about the things that we do, sea rescue is not part of our core purpose. It's not something that we have to do. But I do hear the concerns of our colleagues in Gosport, and I think continuing a conversation around that is important. But it shouldn't stop us from being clear about the reason why we need to remove this from the budget in a year's time. Remember, this is the 26-27 budget rather than now. So it's something that I'll have to take offline with Zoe, and we'll talk to Graham and to our other colleague Stephen to see what we can do to support that there with them. But otherwise, I'm very happy to support the recommendations. So the recommendations are on page 25. They're in paragraph 1 and under bullet points 1 and 2, and so I'm happy to support those. And then we're now on to local nature recovery strategy, item 3, and I think that's Natalie.
It is, yes. Thank you. All right, I'll just get my notes up. Okay, the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the local nature recovery strategy for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and to seek approval for a revised timetable for delivery. Local nature recovery strategies are part of a package of measures introduced by the Environment Act to reverse the nature's decline, and the County Council is the responsible authority for the whole of Hampshire, including the areas outside of our administrative boundaries. As part of the support from DEFRA, the Council was supposed to have a Natural England Senior Advisor, which is a full-time resource to support the preparation of the strategy and provide guidance and advice. However, unfortunately, the advisor that we were appointed has been on long-term sick leave, and as a result, we haven't had the benefit of this support. This has led to Natural England advising that the strategy doesn't adequately prioritise the areas for action or provide clarity on priority areas where multiple options could apply to a single area. In light of this and the additional work that's required to resolve this, the timetable for the delivery of the strategy has to be reviewed. It will no longer be possible to deliver the strategy by July 2025, as envisaged in the previous timetable. The updated timetable proposes consultation with the supporting authorities on the final draft in September of this year, with final publication in December. Thank you.
Super, thanks. And again, this is something that we didn't talk about at Select Committee this morning. It was due to be on the agenda, but for the reason that Natalie's just explained, we've deferred it simply because we need to go back around that loop again. I suppose it's a bit of something we've been talking about for a little bit, but it's a bit of a frustration that we can't proceed with it because Natural England are unhappy because Natural England's person has been off sick. So it's a bit of a catch-22 for us. Zoe, do you have any comment?
No, it's frustrating that you've got a delay, but obviously we understand the circumstances, and I know we've previously debated the report, so it is just a revised timetable, but I'm sure we all understand the need to start implementing this and monitoring it. So obviously that timetable is really important, but understand the circumstances as we move to more of that strategic vision across our region before for nature recovery.
Super, thanks. This is sort of come as news then for Jonathan and Adrian and Malcolm. It's frustrating and disappointing, I think, for us all. Jonathan, do you have any comment to add?
Well, we know that we'll be looking at it on scrutiny on the 26th of June, which, if I look at the page 61 of your agenda, it's that's the May, June. That's the statutory public consultation on the draft LNRS. So that's the right time to be doing it.
That's right, yeah. So super, thanks. Adrian?
Yes, I suppose the question to ask, I very much sympathise with whoever it is that's got the long-term sickness. You don't wish that on anyone and wish them well. But are Natural England going to find someone else if this person is going to continue with long-term sickness? How hard are we pressing them on that point? Because we clearly need to make progress on this.
Would you like me to respond?
Yes, please. Yeah.
We have requested an additional person 2 occasions now, once in a formal letter, and then we followed up in an email. We haven't yet been given anyone, but they have indicated that we should have, but we will need to keep pushing it, I think.
Okay, is there anything else we can do? Any other avenues we can use to put pressure on them? To our MPs or leaders' letters or whatever?
Well, I think they're holding me in reserve at the minute.
Right.
So I've offered to get involved, and we concluded that we would try and do it through the existing channels, if that makes sense. But I share your concern, Adrian, and we that kind of that conversation has occurred where I've said, look, if you want to roll me out and have me talk to people, I think it, I had through another route, an informal route, heard that I think the senior person for us in this part of the country for Natural England is also on sick leave, sadly.
Oh, right.
And I think that might be an additional complication. We wish her well as well, but it's one of those things we do need to get it sorted. It's really important. It's really important we get it over the line. It's actually going to be a really important aspect of the combined authority. So we need to get it sorted very quickly, because it needs to take part. You know, if we're going ahead with the devolution deal, it's an important part of that, because it makes perfect sense for us to combine across the entire piece. But I think that there are good reasons why it's not been happening at the Natural England end that I fully understand.
Okay.
Is that a fair summary, Natalie? Sorry, I've kind of answered it for you, but
Yes, yeah, no, it is. I agree with that.
Yeah. Is that okay, Adrian?
Yeah, that's fine. Fine.
Yeah, I'm happy for them to rule me out, but I'm waiting for them to choose the right time. That's the that's the answer to it, I think.
As I mentioned earlier on, I've got a motion on the agenda for full council on the Climate and Nature Bill, which this kind of aligns with, doesn't it?
Feeds into, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Mark.
Yeah, just one question on the under the finance section. It talks about us trying to get more funding from the government to support the fact that this work is extended now into a new will be extending into a new financial year. What happens if the government doesn't provide this funding?
Well, at the moment, we are managing our spend very carefully in case we do need to, make it last longer. Ultimately, the production of the LNRS is a statutory responsibility. So that's one of the questions that we have in with DEFRA at the moment, is seeking the additional funding and then asking for guidance as to what our position is should that funding not come across. In the meantime, we are continuing to progress this work, so it's not on hold. We are just doing it as efficiently as we can at the moment.
Yeah, I know it might be difficult for you to commit at the moment, but it would be obviously we need this work. We've all said, this work needs to be completed. So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, our target is June. And I suppose our only risk is that without the input that we need from Natural England, we end up with them still not being happy because we've not had their input. And that's our risk situation. So that's where, if we don't get resolution pretty quickly, I think we do need to start sort of getting a bit louder about, they need to find the person that is going to be able to deliver this for us, because we want to get it out to consultation in June and get it all underway.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, everybody? I can see no other hands. So, Natalie, thanks so much. The recommendations are on the recommendations are on page 57 in paragraph 2. I'm very happy to support those. And it's still Natalie, but talking about something quite different now, which is the Prosperity Partnership Board.
Thank you very much. Okay. A local visitor economy partnership, which is abbreviated to LVEP, is a regional partnership that supports the tourism sector across England under the umbrella of Visit England, which is part of the DCMS. Visit England aim to have LVEPs covering the whole of England, which will help to simplify and target their marketing support and other financial support to areas. Currently, as Hampshire and the Solent is not covered by an LVEP, Visit England have withdrawn all support, marketing and funding to the area. It is worth noting the Isle of Wight already have an LVEP in place covering the island on its own, so we're not excluding them from this partnership at the moment. Whilst an LVEP does not come with any direct funding, not having one in place means that local authorities in the region are not able to bid for any funding streams or benefit from any other support. This means the region and the individual visitor attractions in the area are not benefiting from targeted marketing support or additional funding. The purpose of this report is to give approval for Hampshire County Council to submit a joint application with Portsmouth City Council and Southampton City Council, which is managed by Tourism South East, and that application will go into Visit England. This is a slight change from the recommendation as written, which implies that the council can make the decision on the local visitor economy partnership, but of course what we're asking for today is that approval to submit. The Hampshire Prosperity Partnership Board had a report on this at the meeting of the 6th of January and support it, and therefore have asked us to seek approval from this committee in order to take this further. The report also seeks approval for allocation of £5,000 from the Economic Development Reserve for 25-26. This is our annual membership fee for Tourism South East, which the Tourism South East are using to actually fund the setup of the LVET for the first 12 months, along with their other members, which includes the cities and some of the districts. It is then hoped longer term there'll be a different management model put in place, which would include but not limited to being part of a future strategic authority. Thank you.
Yep, super, thanks. Before I say anything, Zoe, any comment?
No, just to say very much welcome. And I think what was clear in the Prosperity Partnership Board of how this will benefit the wider community, and obviously our strategic work as we work with the wider authorities such as Portsmouth and Southampton. And I think all of us can welcome this move to more strategic regional work, and what I would call also preserving our heritage and our culture across and through those corridors between those authorities, and obviously the tourism community and the economic benefits that brings.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, any comment to make?
Look, I've written down Cunard and Carnival. Look, I can tell you from my own experience that a lot of Hampshire's missing out on all these ocean-going liners that dock at Portsmouth, at Southampton. And there's a lot of them, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of money. They all tend to go odd places like Stonehenge. Okay, but they're not being directed to go to places like Winchester. I brought this up before, that we need to get into these people, into these organizations, so that they advise their tourist clients to have a look at Winchester. There's a lot for them to look at Winchester, and not as far as Stonehenge is. I'm leaving that with you because I presume this is where the LVEP could do something about it.
Yeah, that's exactly the point of this, to be able to identify opportunities for us to improve the visitor economy and our tourism offer across the piece. So that's just the kind of work that this should do. Rod, welcome. You've got any comment to make on this one?
Thank you, Nick. Firstly, apologies for my late arrival. I've only just walked in through the door. No, I must admit, having come into Southampton on a cruise ship, my experience was that there was little offering from our side. So yeah, I go along with that.
Super. Okay, thanks. And looks like the dog approves as well, so that's good. Adrian.
Just one question, which is on the budget and the finances. Portsmouth and Southampton are down to contribute the same as us. And the districts, boroughs and districts, is 2,000 in total. I get the impression that districts vary in their enthusiasm for this. I suppose it depends. If you're Winchester, you'll take one view, but if you're another district, you might take another view. Is that 2,000 secure?
Yes, that relates to fees currently paid by districts to Tourism South East. So it's payment that they've already committed to. It's more about using it in that way. But you are correct. There is it's not a consensus in terms of district support. Some are very active in supporting, and therefore they already pay into Tourism South East. For others, it's not a priority, and that's completely understood. It depends on the local priority for the area.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Malcolm.
And a couple of questions on this one. So just to expand on that point, about districts being engaged in this, obviously Winchester's a big tourist spot, but they're not listed on this paper. And I specifically the district council, I was apart from for paying for it. So how does that all work? How's that engagement working with the district councils?
Yeah, the districts are fully aware. We've had a number of meetings about it where they kind of gave a view early on as to whether or not we should be pursuing this or not for the area. Winchester were a large supporter, as you would expect. So were places like New Forest, interestingly Basingstoke very much as well, and East Hants all saw kind of a real kind of benefit around supporting tourism. As I say, others less so, but that's because they have other economic priorities. But essentially, the business model as written is based on the upper tier contributions. The districts is essentially seen as a benefit, as an additional to kind of help. So ultimately, whatever we do across Hampshire as a whole, picking up the cities as well, should cover the whole area. It's just that some of the districts wanted a little additional focus on their areas, and that's what their funding from them will cover.
Okay, thank you. A bit on the Isle of Wight, having an LVEP in place already, obviously with our
He's frozen. Malcolm, if you can hear us, you've frozen and we can't hear you. No.
Sometimes going out and coming back in is the solution to that.
Yeah. No, he's stuck there and he's not coming back in the minute. So I think perhaps his question, let's see if he comes back in. One of the questions I had was that clearly it seems to strike me that this is very clearly something that will eventually fall under the combined authority, and so being able to bring the Isle of Wight in to the back into the fold so it covers the entire area, I presume is something that would be relatively easy to do if that was if that was needed and that was the case.
Yeah, absolutely, because they already have one in place. They've had one for a little while actually, and are huge supporters of it. That they say it's been very beneficial to them. Yeah, there would be no issue with merging them long term should that be what the Isle of Wight long to do. But yes, you're right. The intention or the expectation is anyway that it's likely to sit within a strategic authority in the future.
Right, Malcolm, we got to you saying Isle of Wight, and I kind of guessed what the question might be, but I'm sorry if I kind of.
No, that was, thank you. I think I heard the answer. That was great. My final question was, why wasn't this done sooner? We must have known that Visit England funding would be removed if an LVIP was not in place. Why has it taken us till now to do this?
I think there's a number of reasons, but I think the biggest one really is the complexities of working across a number of different local authority boundaries. It just takes slightly longer to implement it as opposed to the Isle of Wight, for example, which were just having to agree it amongst themselves. So we've had to go through a bit of a longer process really within each organisation to work through what each organisation was looking to achieve and then to start this governance process. So it's just taken slightly longer because of the complexity around it.
I think
one of the arguments for a strategic authority, perhaps.
Well, I think one. I mean, it is, but it's also. I think to bring it into context as well. It's only since May that we've been responsible for this for the post local enterprise partnership functions, and they were linked to local enterprise partnerships. But of course, we've always had a couple of different arrangements that covered our area in the sense that there was the Solent LEP and then the EM3 LEP, and EM3 covered part of Surrey as well, and only a part of the county, whereas the Solent LEP covered the 2 cities in the island and another part, and so it's only really recently that we've had sort of our own discrete boundary for all of that we've been able to look at how it works, and sort of that process of the conversation about this has been sort of both a straightforward and a fully supportive and well-informed one through the Prosperity Partnership Board and also through the Joint Leaders Board, and that links back to Adrian's point of where are the districts and boroughs in this in terms of their input into things as well, and so that's worked quite well. But it is very clearly something that I think would sit full square under the mayoral authority if we get to that point, because it makes complete sense that it sits with economic development and development of our offer exactly as Jonathan and Rod say, to ensure that we're capitalising on the tourism market from the cruise ships docking at Southampton, and and all of that as well. Any other points, everyone? I know our colleagues in Southampton and Portsmouth are desperately waiting for us to approve this one, because we're the last ones in line to do so, and I'm very happy to do so on that basis. It's an example also of us having worked quite well together in putting it together. So the recommendations are on page 67 in paragraphs 3 and 4, and I'm very happy to approve those as well. So next item, number 5, is the Manydown Garden Communities business plan and budget, and this is over to Emma.
So, leader, this one I'm going to.
Oh, sorry,
just given
Gary.
my understanding of Manydown, Emma's help with the drafting of the paper. Members, what you'll see before you is a recommendation to approve the Manydown Garden Communities, which is MGC, business plan and associated budget, which are both included in the pack as confidential appendices. This is the last stage in the process. Members will be aware we successfully completed the monumental feat of securing the acquisition of the land late last calendar year. And so now, as the various kind of governance forums and groups that exist within that, we are now planning for delivery. A key component part of that is this organisation called MGC, the Manydown Garden Communities, and it's the business plan for that organisation and associated budget that you see before you for approval. That budget and business plan have been through a number of governance forums already, most notably including the MGC board, which leader myself and Councillor Latham sit on as the Hampshire County Council representatives, and we've been well supported by our associated legal and finance officers in that process as well. So refer you back to recommendation 2 within the report and welcome any questions.
Super, thanks very much, Gary. We've had a conversation. I checked with my councillor colleagues ahead of this part of the meeting just to confirm that nobody had any questions about the exempt papers. I've certainly taken the appendices into account. They're exempt because of their commercial confidentiality at this stage, so that's the only reason why they're not part of the public pack of information that we've been talking about. So rather than go around everybody and ask because of that element, is there anything anyone would like to say, sort of hands up or wave at me? Adrian and then Malcolm.
Just to say that I welcome progress being made on this. It's 30 years now since we jointly bought this land with Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. It's a tough old project to bring together, and it's complex, but I welcome progress being made.
Great, thanks, Malcolm.
Yeah, I wanted to ask why we felt that a climate change impact assessment wasn't needed for this. Building houses and building properties of any kind is one of the things that has a massive impact on carbon that we produce. And so I would have expected it to be sitting alongside any business plan, that you would have a climate change impact assessment alongside the finances. We've seen other places where this hasn't happened. For example, we got I find it difficult. We can't just ignore it at this point. If finances are important, we've got a problem in North Whiteley at the moment that the new school is not going to get. Right now, the plan is for it to have a gas heating rather than a heat pump, and the reason that's for that is purely financial. That's the reason that so I don't. We cannot say that this is happening later. It is finance and the climate change impact assessments need to, from my point of view, need to run in parallel. They need to be there.
So I think in terms of saying it has to happen later, I think it is right that it needs to happen later, because we're not talking about construction as yet. So this is how we parcel up things and manage things going forward. So I think you're right. You're absolutely right in terms of needing the climate impact assessment. But I think it comes at the next stage along, which is to do with beginning to identify what goes where. Hopefully, Gary's going to say that's right. He might say it's wrong. I don't know.
It is correct, Leader, albeit I'll just supplement with a bit more information. So, Councillor Wallace, I think it was slightly before your tenure as member, but we did a members briefing on Many Down, where I talked through the really important role of the delivery vehicle, which is the organisation called MDV. Sorry, there's far too many acronyms. But MDV, which is the delivery vehicle, which Hampshire County Council is a shareholder in, alongside Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, and our development partner, Urban and Civic. We have within the various kind of suites of documentation for that, all of the documentation that has taken the development through planning, where absolutely climate change has been a key consideration, but then also various strategic documents, what we call the key phase 1 business plan and the associated development plans for the site. And I can absolutely reassure you, both the wider environmental considerations and the climate change impacts have been absolutely scrutinised and reviewed as part of those documents, and then also the associated planning application. What I'm very happy to do, Leader, given Councillor Wallace's not being party to those previous briefings, Councillor Wallace, if you'd like a separate briefing on the environmental considerations, which have been long and well thought through around this development, very, very happy to give you that information.
Thank you. I'd be very happy to take you up on that offer. But to go back to my point, I do think that if we're signing off and perhaps, you know, it's too late, maybe too late for this one, but going forward, I do think if we're signing off on finance for something like this, perhaps we should be signing off on the climate change impact assessment at the same time. Something to consider, to consider going forward.
And I can promise you we will, and I'll let Gary brief you, because it is possibly the most complex, certainly in all my time in business, it's the most complex arrangement I've ever seen for something like this. And hopefully if we can explain to you how it's all being constructed, how the deal is constructed, how the governance and the process has been created is probably the better word rather than constructed, then you'll understand why at this point it's not quite the right point to talk about that, but there is a point coming up where it will be. So, but I'll leave Gary to explain that to you, if that's okay. Everybody else, is that any other comments? Adrian?
Yes, I just wanted to, obviously, I think we're all on the same place as Malcolm on this. Just wanted to say there's development in my patch, which has just finished. The last few houses have been built. And already residents are looking at putting solar panels on their roofs. Good, glad they're doing that. But why? Why are we still building new estates without these things built in? And I know that a lot of the developments taking place to the east of Basingstoke in the Chinham area, County Council used to have a very heavy involvement in the design of that and was very proud of some of the outcomes of that. I hope we can have the same influence with Many Down on issues like this to achieve those positive outcomes. There are so many things, and to be honest, I think if you offer people houses with these things built in, that will be a really positive selling point. Thank you.
I think the having been involved in the creation of 2 local plans in Test Valley now, I can tell you that the frustration about the fact that you cannot make developers add these kind of things to their homes, particularly solar panels, or when you're giving permission for commercial and industrial units that are created, you know, why do we not require solar panels to be on their roofs, for example, and all sorts of other enhancements that would be both environmentally friendly and have helped us all. And the frustration is that it all comes down to national planning policy, and it comes down to various different things, and all of that's out with our control. You know, in this place, and indeed it's something that the county doesn't get involved in. If anybody's watching and wondering why we don't do it, it's something that's very much for the planning authorities that sit with the districts and boroughs, but even they can't do it. And a lot of that's to do with the lobbying of the development industry over very many years to reduce their cost in building houses and enabling them to make the most profit possible. I think, and that's a personal view, but you know, it is a frustration, and I completely agree with you, but unfortunately it's outside of our control in large part, although it's something to which we should be mindful if we are partially the landowner, and I know alongside Basingstoke, and you know, doing whatever we can to encourage that to happen in any of the developments that we are building.
If I can just come back on that, I mean, I totally accept everything you say there, Nick, but in Basingstoke, where land was publicly owned by us or the Borough Council, we basically wouldn't sell it to developers unless they were prepared to do this. We didn't actually need national legislation to make it happen. It wasn't in those days, it wasn't the sort of things we're talking about now for environmental purposes, but we were able to lay down conditions.
Yeah.
So I hope we can explore that as time goes on.
And that's our ability to influence, and you're absolutely right.
Mm.
Yeah. Sorry, Malcolm.
So I just want to jump in with one more quick point. Just on the business models. I mean, there are new business models coming out all the time for this kind of stuff. I know that in partnership with some energy companies, some houses are now being built with solar panels and heat pumps and batteries, and on some developments they're doing these. The business model is that the energy company pays for all that development, and people then pay, I don't know, a few K more for the house, but then they get free energy for the first 10 years.
Yeah.
And the energy company uses, and there's innovative models out there. It is a really important developing field. It's something, and we need to do this. We need to get engaged with this stuff early, if in the process. Otherwise, as we've seen elsewhere, it can be too late to do it as it gets towards the end. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So sorry, there's another. I'm not seeing your Louise. Sorry.
So
I'm really sorry. Have you had your hand up for a while? Because I can't see all the hands.
No,
I'm
I was
really
just in
sorry.
response to Councillor Wallace, just to say that the Manydown North development is an all-electric development, and I think as part of the briefing, Councillor Wallace, you'll understand the sort of what I would call the eco-credentials of the scheme. But you're also right in saying, Leader, that it's about planning policy and building regs requirements. So the developer will only meet the requirements that are in place nationally. If the county council wants to impose something, which it might choose to do, it's a procurement and it's a different way of delivering the scheme. So we would have had to have made those decisions earlier than we haven't to be able to change that position on Manydown because of the joint JV arrangement that we've got in place. And that's what we were doing in Chinham back in the day, Councillor Collett. But the legislation has changed around how you can use your land owning powers. And so we tend to rely on the planning process rather than our land owning powers to do that.
Isn't that an argument for why we should be looking at the climate change in parallel with signing off this business case?
No, frankly, no, it isn't, because we've gone beyond that point, as Louise has explained, and we are in a place where we are part of a joint venture with other parties, and it's a pretty complex picture, and this isn't the right place for it. I'm confident that's the case, and I understand your point of view, but it's not the right place for us to have it here. So I think the important thing, Malcolm, is that what we need to do is to get you so that you understand the bigger picture, and of how this has come about and how we've got to this point is probably the easiest way to do that, and to explain, you know, why we're doing this now, and at what stage we are in the process. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Sorry, that sounds a bit cryptic, but it's incredibly complex, and I need to go through the pages of notes I've got that from Peter and Gary, who briefed me a long time ago about it before the member briefing went out. So that's probably where we are. I'm going to move on, only in the sense that we need to move on to the final couple of items. So the recommendations here are in paragraph 2 on page 83, and then there are also appendices to the report under item 6 of the agenda as well. I'm very happy to approve those, and what we will do those. We will come back and we will ensure that you've got a briefing, Malcolm, so that you understand that part of it. And I think, Adrian, if you'd like to understand a bit about where we've got to so far and what controls are and how things have changed in terms of how we do that, as Louise has explained, that I'm very happy to organise that as well.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, super. Okie dokie. So we've got a project update about the Havant Extra Care facility, which is Louise again.
Sorry, Leader, could we just exclude the press and public?
Oh, sorry, is that, so we're excluding everybody for this part?
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
So
I'm really sorry. Okay, I thought I was just excluding people if we wanted to talk about money down. Sorry, Louise. So in which case we've got to say goodbye to everybody online. The next couple of items are that the press and public are exempt. So the press and public should be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business, as it is likely in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings that if members of the public were present during these items, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. And further, that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons set out in the reports. So could we please stop the webcast?
I'll let you know when we stopped.